What if I told you there is a man in the Bible who appears without a birth, without a family, without a genealogy, without a recorded death, and somehow stands above Abraham himself? A man so mysterious that thousands of years later the New Testament would use him to explain Jesus. Who was Melchizedek? And why does Scripture seem determined to keep his identity hidden? Tonight we follow one of the strangest trails in the entire Bible, and where it leads is far more unsettling than most people realize. Before we begin, if you love uncovering the hidden threads that connect Genesis to Revelation, subscribe to Bible Depths. Every week we dive beneath the surface of Scripture and explore the mysteries most people never notice. Because sometimes the most important truths are hidden in the smallest details. And Melchizedek may be the greatest example of that. Genesis 14. Abraham has just fought a war, not a symbolic battle, a real one. Kings have invaded, cities have fallen. Lot has been captured. Abraham gathers his men, pursues the enemy through the night and wins. The tension is over, the danger has passed. The reader expects the story to move on. Instead, someone appears, out of nowhere. No introduction, no background, no genealogy, no origin story, just this. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. And immediately a question emerges. Who is this man? Genesis usually introduces important figures carefully. We know where people come from, who their fathers were, what family they belonged to. The Bible cares deeply about genealogy, but not here. Melchizedek simply steps onto the stage as if we are already supposed to know him. Then he blesses Abraham, and Abraham receives the blessing. Pause there. This should feel strange, because Abraham is not just anybody. He is God's chosen man, the father of the covenant, the one through whom nations will be blessed. Yet Abraham receives a blessing from Melchizedek, and Hebrews later reminds us, the lesser is blessed by the greater. Think about that. Genesis quietly places Melchizedek above Abraham. Most readers never notice it, but Hebrews does, and it changes everything. Ask yourself this: why would Scripture introduce a figure greater than Abraham, then immediately hide him? Keep that question in your mind, because the answer comes much later. The name Melchizedek is not random. In Hebrew, Melech means king, Zedek means righteousness. His name literally means king of righteousness. But it gets stranger. He's also called king of Salem. Salem means peace. Hebrews highlights both meanings, king of righteousness, king of peace. Think about those titles, righteousness and peace. Centuries later, Isaiah would describe the coming Messiah in similar language, a righteous ruler, a prince of peace. The parallels begin immediately. Coincidence or intentional design? The deeper we go, the harder coincidence becomes. Most readers read past this detail. Don't. It matters. Melchizedek brings bread and wine. Why? Why not a sacrifice? Why not an animal? Why not grain? Why bread and wine? This is over 1,000 years before Jesus, 1,000 years before the Last Supper. Yet here stands a priest-king offering bread and wine to Abraham. The symbols are remarkable. Bread, provision, life, sustenance. Wine, joy, covenant, blessing. And later, Jesus gathers his disciples, takes bread, takes wine, and establishes a covenant. The connection is impossible to ignore. The Bible often whispers long before it shouts, and here it whispers very loudly. The shadow appears long before the substance arrives. Then something astonishing happens. Abraham gives Melchizedek a tenth of everything, the first recorded tithe in Scripture. Notice something. The law has not been given. Moses does not exist. Levi does not exist. Aaron does not exist. The priesthood does not exist. Yet Abraham voluntarily gives a tithe to Melchizedek. Why? Because Abraham recognizes authority, spiritual authority, a priesthood higher than himself. Hebrews later builds an entire argument on this fact. If Abraham paid tithes to Melchizedek, then Levi, who would eventually descend from Abraham, symbolically paid tithes too, meaning Melchizedek's priesthood stands above the Levitical priesthood before it ever existed. That is a staggering claim, and Hebrews makes it deliberately. And then, nothing. No biography, no death, no descendants, no follow-up, no explanation. 4 verses, gone. Imagine introducing one of the most significant figures in Scripture and then refusing to explain him for 1,000 years. The silence is almost as important as the appearance. Why? Because absence becomes part of the message, and eventually Hebrews will tell us exactly that. Imagine living in Israel. Generation after generation passes. Kings arise, kingdoms fall, prophets speak, wars rage, the temple is built, the temple is destroyed, and Melchizedek is never mentioned, not once, for roughly a millennium. Then suddenly, Psalm 110. David writes one of the most quoted psalms in the New Testament, and in the middle of it, God says, "You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek." Wait, Melchizedek, after 1,000 years, why bring him back now? Because David is speaking about the Messiah, and suddenly the mystery figure from Genesis becomes central again. The coming king will belong to Melchizedek's order, not Aaron's, not Levi's, Melchizedek's. Why? Because God was preparing something bigger than Israel's priesthood, something older, something eternal, something that existed before Sinai, before Moses, before the law. Here's the question. Why would God establish a priesthood before the priesthood? Hold on to that. Hebrews is about to answer. Hebrews 7 changes everything. Listen carefully. The author writes, "Without father or mother or genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life." That is one of the most shocking statements in the New Testament. Think about what it sounds like. No father, no mother, no genealogy, no beginning, no end. Who does that sound like? Many readers immediately conclude this must be Jesus, a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ. And throughout church history, many have believed exactly that. But not everyone agrees. Let's examine the possibilities. Some scholars believe Melchizedek was a historical king, a real human ruler, a priest of God Most High, living in Canaan. If true, this reveals something profound. God was working outside Abraham's family, outside ethnic Israel, outside what we would expect. The God of Genesis was already reaching the nations, even before Israel existed. That is a powerful message, but it leaves questions unanswered, especially Hebrews 7. Others believe Melchizedek was a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ, a theophany, Christ appearing before his birth. This view explains the language, no beginning, no end, king of righteousness, king of peace, bread and wine, blessing Abraham. The parallels become overwhelming. Yet Hebrews says, resembling the Son of God, not necessarily being the Son of God. resembling him, and that distinction matters, which leads to the third view. Many scholars believe Melchizedek was a real historical person, but Scripture intentionally omits his genealogy. Why? Because Scripture deliberately withholds them. His literary presentation becomes symbolic, a living prophecy embedded in Genesis, a pattern pointing forward to Christ. And this interpretation explains why Hebrews focuses so heavily on what Scripture does not say. The silence becomes theology, the omission becomes revelation, and suddenly the mystery deepens, because perhaps God was shaping the story itself, thousands of years in advance. Quick question: which view do you find most convincing so far?
Historical king, pre-incarnate Christ, or prophetic pattern? Comment below. I read every comment, and some of the best discussions on this channel happen there. Now let's go deeper, because we have not reached the strangest part yet. This changes how many people read the Bible. The Levitical priesthood was temporary. Hebrews says so repeatedly. It pointed forward. It was a shadow, not the final reality. Melchizedek represents something older, and older here means deeper. His priesthood existed before Sinai, before sacrifices, before regulations, before temple rituals. This is crucial. Jesus did not merely replace the old priesthood, he fulfilled what the old priesthood was always trying to become. That is why Hebrews connects him to Melchizedek, not Aaron. Aaron belonged to the shadow. Melchizedek points toward the substance. Now step back. Look at the entire Bible. Genesis, a mysterious priest-king appears. Psalm 110, the Messiah is connected to him. Hebrews, Jesus fulfills the pattern. 3 books, 3 time periods, 2,000 years apart. One thread. The thread never breaks. The Bible is filled with connections like this, but few are as precise as Melchizedek. It feels less like random history and more like design. Here is the deeper truth. Melchizedek is not ultimately about Melchizedek. He is about Jesus. Every mystery points forward. A king and priest, Jesus. Righteousness and peace, Jesus. Bread and wine, Jesus. An eternal priesthood, Jesus. A blessing greater than Abraham, Jesus. The purpose of Melchizedek is not merely to puzzle us, it is to prepare us, to train our eyes to recognize Christ long before Bethlehem, long before Calvary, long before the empty tomb. The fingerprints are already there, hidden, waiting. Sometimes God reveals the ending at the beginning. Why does this matter today? Because Melchizedek reminds us that God is always working beyond what we can see. Abraham probably did not understand the full significance of that meeting. Neither did David. Even the disciples struggled to understand, yet God was weaving a story across centuries. The same God is weaving your story too. You may only see 4 verses. God sees the whole narrative. You may see randomness. God sees design. You may see silence. God sees preparation. And sometimes the things that make the least sense today become the clearest evidence of his hand tomorrow. Melchizedek appears, blesses Abraham, receives a tithe, disappears, returns 1,000 years later in prophecy, returns again in Hebrews, and suddenly stands at the center of one of Scripture's greatest revelations. A king, a priest, a mystery, a signpost, a shadow pointing toward the eternal Son of God. Who was Melchizedek? The truth is that after 2,000 years, the mystery remains. But perhaps that is exactly the point, because some mysteries are not given to satisfy curiosity, they are given to deepen wonder. What do you think? Was Melchizedek a historical king, a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ, or a prophetic pattern intentionally woven into Scripture? Tell me below. If this deep dive challenged your thinking, share it with someone who loves Bible mysteries, and subscribe to Bible Depths. Next episode, the 4 horsemen of Revelation. What they actually represent may surprise you. Until then, Jesus Christ is King, and He loves you.